For nearly 20 years, the Urban Project has been providing vital services to the Toronto people. The organization is now in dire straits and needs to create efficiencies in order to keep the doors open, the programs running, and the lights on. And we're here to provide the tools so you can do just that. Hello and welcome. My name is Mark, and these are my colleagues Anna and JD, and we are here today with Kilt Consulting. Mr. Molina, what we have for you today is a plan so you can take decisive action and ensure that the lights stay on. So without further ado, let's get started. So what we did first off was to look at the issues, look at the organization, and really try to define what the problem is. And so we came up with a simple statement that we can work forward with. That statement being, how can the Urban Rehab Project improve solvency while continuing to offer the vital services that they do offer and maintaining that not-for-profit atmosphere and their different values and morals. So moving forward, what we have for you is our plan. We are going to overhaul Cabbagetown. It's a very underperforming location for you right now, and it's important that you look and strongly address that location. As well, improve efficiency with partial sale of some of your real estate. You have a lot of really good holdings, and this is a really quick way that you can use to increase the solvency and fund some of your campaigns that are going to be necessary. And then lastly is the donation campaign that we think is necessary as well to boost the funds to keep you in solvency so you don't go bankrupt in the next year and a half. And with that, I'll pass it on to Anna, who will get into some of the analysis of the organization.
Thank you, Mark. So before we get into the meat of the presentation, before we take you through the implementation of our strategy, I want to walk you through the analysis that we did of your company and its current situation so that you can kind of see the thought process that we went through and the considerations that we took into account when coming up with the strategy that we did. So looking first at some of the strengths of your organization, we wanted to really focus in on them so that you know what you can leverage going forward in the future. One of the first things is the long-standing community support that you have in all of the locations that you operate within the Toronto area, as well as very well-established programming and long-established programming. And we see this culminating in a perfect example with the senior program that you have at 3 of your different locations. So there, a lot of the seniors that have gone through your program are now coming back to volunteer. Over half of your volunteers are actually coming from the seniors, and they're also providing 3/4 of the donations that you see annually. And what we see this being, or why we see this as being a strength, is that you know that you have that support out there. You know that you have those members of the community that you can reach out to for further volunteering, or perhaps donations, or even help garnering more donations from the wider community. Also, you're sitting on some very valuable real estate with your 4 locations. Not only that, but it's completely debt-free, and it's located in a city that has one of the lowest vacancy rates in the country. So it's really valuable, and it's really special for you to have those locations. As well, you see increasing demand for your programs at some of the locations such as St. Clair Weston and Davenport, Ossington. Now, some of the limitations that we see with your current situation and things that you need to keep in mind moving forward is, first of all, that your endowment fund is declining. You cannot use it in the future to cover some of the deficits that you're going to have if your program continues to run the way that it is. As well, some of your employees are unionized, and that is something that you need to keep in mind when you're thinking about whether you're going to reallocate them or whether you're thinking about program cutbacks. Now, some of the most important changes that we're seeing, and one of the most limiting factors, is the shifting demographics in the areas that you're servicing currently. So what we see, and what I want to talk about in a moment, is that you're not necessarily reflecting these demographic changes with the program choices that you're making at certain facilities that you have. As well, what this results in is a decrease in demand and utilization rates, most notably at Cabbagetown. Moving on, what we see for you as a very strategic goal is obviously to improve solvency, as Mark mentioned. That's what you need to do in order to move forward. But as well, we want to preserve your mission. We want to make sure that you continue servicing those disadvantaged areas within Toronto, and continue providing that lifeline to the community. And with these 2 goals in mind, your long-term goal is really to stay in the community, to stay there for the long term and provide that support for disadvantaged members. Looking ahead, frontage on your existing properties. We don't think this is a good idea because of the fact that you're just going to be adding to the debt load that you already have. We don't see this as being something that's going to be sustainable in the long run, because if this doesn't work out, then where are you going to get your future revenues from? Now, new donation initiatives are important, and you probably have the opportunity to reach out to one another in the community, but you mentioned to us that any new donation initiative would require a strategy and a team that would cost up to $200,000 to implement. And we don't see you having that kind of money right now. And while it is an important consideration and something that Jane will talk about more, our most important consideration is a program overhaul and reallocation. Now, why we see this as important is because Cabbagetown itself is underutilized at 45% of capacity at the moment. Not only that, but it incurs some of the highest expenses along with Davenport Ossington. However, it also brings in the lowest revenues. So Davenport Ossington brings in some of the highest revenues. It is a well-used location and it has opportunities for expansion. But Cabbagetown is really a drain on your funds right now. And you can see this because, especially the child care youth programs have been declining in enrollment by 30% over the past 2 years. And you've seen that it will decline by further 10% this year. So we don't really see this as reflecting the realities of the community. While the community is aging, you have less young people coming to you, but you're still providing that service and you're still incurring really high expenses for very low revenues compared to the other locations that you're operating. But now, St. Clair Weston and Davenport Ossington, respectively, are going to see a 15% and 5% increase in the demand for all of their programs. And so what we really see for you overall from the considerations that we take into account is a program overhaul and real allocation of both employees and services. And Jane is now going to walk you through that.
Okay, so it should come as no surprise that the best way that we're going to help you remain solvent is to reduce your expenses and increase your revenue. So we're going to do that through this 3-step program. The first of which is to increase the programming cost. Second of which will be to overhaul Cabbagetown. And the third would be to start some pilot campaigns and rearrange some staff to make sure that you're really using your resources as efficiently as possible. So we'll move right into the first step of this, which is to increase the programming cost. We've chosen an increase of 3% or $3 per program in this right away. That's per program day. In 2008, we reduced it by $2. That was because of the economic recession and the additional strain that people were feeling in the communities. But now we need to step back and realize the economic recession is over. We're moving into a position where Canadians are a little better off, and we're really at a point where you have the option to offer your services at a slightly increased cost or not offer them at all. This business is in dire straits, and so we need to really move forward and make the changes that need to be made. We also realize because senior programming, which takes up about 9,000 project days a year, the senior programming currently brings in $0 of revenue. So that's something that we'd like to see an increase in. While we don't necessarily want to charge seniors to go on a group walk, when they are taking computer literacy courses or courses about learning about moving to Canada and new things about Canada, we see them as being willing to pay a couple dollars a day for programming. And that's going to be one area where you're already spending $200,000 plus a year. So it'd be great if we could see some revenue coming in from that as well. And with that 3% increase, or $3 per day increase, currently you're sitting at about between $5 and $6 per programming day, depending on the location. So this is necessarily a 33% increase for you, which people might see as a large increase, but overall, you're still offering your services at about 80% less than most facilities offer services such as childcare for. So overall, you're still doing the best you can for your community while still being able to offer the same services. Now moving to step number 2, and this is the overhaul of Cabbagetown. So now, we know that you mentioned that one alternative you looked at is to completely shut down Cabbagetown because you are okay 45% utilization, and because the demographics are changing, the community is coming above the poverty line slowly but surely. But the one thing we need to keep in mind is that there are still members within that community who are below the poverty line, and there's still members within that community who value your services and need those services to move forward. So while we don't think it's drastic enough to need to close the facility, we do recommend a 50% cut. So right now, you're at about 45% utilization. That might continue to drop. Some of the people you're serving within the demographic might be people who are above the poverty line, people who aren't really your value targets in your implementation. So by decreasing your programming there by 50%, you're going to be able to remove some of your staff, definitely decrease expenses by anywhere between 40 and 50% in the facility. And you're going to free up some very great real estate in downtown Toronto. If you value this property at approximately $6 million, we think it would be great if you could split that facility, use 2 floors of it, sell the other 2 floors. That way you can still offer the programming to people who need it, but it also provides you some revenue and income. Now, we realize that there's going to be expenses with selling some of your facilities, whether you need to rearrange some things to make sure that you can still offer your current services in a smaller area, or the real estate costs associated with selling. So moving forward, we're going to count this as an additional revenue of $2.5 million rather than 3, just to be conservative. So with that, we realize that we've got unionized staff in this facility. We're going to have to do something with all these employees who value their work with these children. And I'll go forward with that a little bit later into our pilot program. But we also see this as being an area where, well, now that you've got this extra $2.5 million of revenue, why can't you go ahead and spend $200,000 in that donation campaign that you really value? And that's going to help you boost your revenue in the following years to come as well. Now we're going to step 3, the implementation. And this is where we would like to run some pilot programs using some of those staff that we will be freeing up within the Cabbagetown facility. First, St. Clair Weston, we do have an influx of immigrants, and you're planning to see an increase of about 15% in programming. Currently, that facility does not have a youth program. So with a bunch of new Canadian families moving into the area, there's a high likelihood that there's going to be youth who value the opportunity to find new jobs and to learn about the Canadian economy and how they can best become a part of it. So we think that some of these unionized staff, it might be a good idea to suggest, rather than just quitting and offering the severance packages, they can move to different facilities. They mentioned that they value the ability to continue to help people within Toronto. So it's better to be able to offer them a different option rather than just telling them you have another job for that anymore. Another one we saw is that Denver, Ossington is a growing location, and they highly value childcare in that area. The facility is full for childcare. There's double the waiting list of the spaces they've got available, so why not move some of those childcare staff there if they're willing? And this is definitely an area where we see being able to bring in more revenue as well, because these are high-value services there, whereas at Cabbagetown, they're kind of underutilized and not necessarily valued anymore. However, at Cabbagetown, we do see that it might be a good idea to open up a pilot program for seniors. There's not necessarily a seniors program there right now, but the population is aging. The population is moving above the poverty line. If we can take some seniors on walks and then have them become part of our community, have them become part of your community with volunteer hours and with potential donations, might be a good idea. So that's definitely something that we're going to look into as well. So the main question with these 3 implementation strategies is, how is this going to help you remain solvent, and what are the numbers going to look like? So we'll now look at the revenues. Because we will be increasing by $3 per programming day, the revenues for each location are definitely going to increase. Even Cabbagetown with 50% cutbacks, because they're only utilized 45%, that means you're only getting 45% of your revenue. So even with the cutbacks, you're not necessarily going to see a difference in the revenue that comes in from that facility in a negative way, because there's still room for most of the people who are already going there. And then for our expenses, we see that Cabbagetown is going to be nearly cut in half, and that's because we plan to reallocate approximately half of the staff. If there's half of the resources necessary, that seems appropriate. And then moving forward, we did increase the St. Clair Weston and Davenport Ossington areas by just over $100,000, and that is to account for an influx of new staff if they choose to move from the Cabbagetown location, as well as increases that you might see in materials needed if they do continue to grow at a rate of 15 or 5% per year. So moving to the next slide, we've got our total revenues then sitting at about $1.2 million, give or take, which is an increase from the approximately $700,000 we received last year. And that is again going to be because of the $3 per program increase. It's largely where that's going to come from. And the expenses, we managed to remove about $800,000 from the expenses, even with the increases included. And that is again going to come largely from the cuts at Cabbagetown. Then about the donations, this has been adjusted to assume a 15% increase. If you are able to run your $200,000 donation plan, you set about a 20 to 30% increase in donations, but to account for the time that that program will take and just to remain conservative, we scaled that down a bit. And then, of course, the sale of Cabbagetown, which we counted at $2.5 million. So overall, this looks pretty good for the year. This will leave your company with $1.8 million on the positive side, rather than the $4 million deficit that you saw last year. We see see this as being very important, again, because the endowment fund has been decreasing so much in the past few years. We think it's really important that that's not something that we touch this year. Or maybe even we start looking at a new way to renew the endowment fund, since your business is originally where that endowment fund came from. And now I'd like to pass it off to Mark to discuss the timeline for our implementation.
Thanks, Jane. So looking at how this is going to kind of play out, it's really important that you take some decisive action right away. With the increase in fee, we figure 2 to 3 weeks of notice to some of your members would be a good idea. So starting Monday, perhaps start informing your staff and your members, sending them information so that they know. Then prepare for cuts at the Cabbage Town, and let some of the staff know that there may be some positions changing. Develop a plan to inform them and keep them up to date so that they don't feel like they're sidelined. Really keep them involved and in the loop. And then begin the pilot project preparation. So talk with some of the managers in the different locations where the pilot projects that we've suggested to be implemented to get them with that ball rolling. Then on April 1st, we see that is when we can increase the fee a couple dollars just to start bringing in that revenue. We only have 9 months left of the year, so we really want to see some immediate results. So that's where that's going to come from. And then at this time as well, you can see possibly if you've been able to act quickly enough, get some of your Cabbage Town consolidation happening, get some of the staff moved to different locations. Moving on to May 1st, several months now, launch the pilot programs. We figure several months to design the programs and facilitate them in the new locations, but with the reallocation of staff is more than adequate. So, and then as well as the phase for rent, it says rent, but for sale, to start garnering some potential sales and potential offers on the space. We can work with the realtor to ensure that you get the best possible value. And then moving on to November 1st, 6 months down the line, just look at the pilot projects, see if they were implemented well, see if they were received well, and move forward with them after reviewing whether or not they were successful. So with any sort of implementation, there's definitely some risks that need to be looked at, maybe addressed, and mitigated, hopefully. So the first one that we have for you here is the risk that the new pilot projects are unsuccessful. And you'll know this, the trigger point, if they are successful at November 1st, the 6 month. Give them that length of time to be reviewed. Ensure that you let them test their legs and see whether or not they are viable solutions and viable programs. And if at the end of that time, it's simply best to end those programs if they're not successful. There will be some consequences with having to maybe reshift, reallocate some of those staff that were shifted in the beginning. The next risk that we see as a potential is with the reallocation of the 7 unionized staff members that we have suggested. They may choose not to move and may not like that, and depending on the contract, it may be necessary that they just take a buyout, which we would mention would be a full year's pay. So we're we allocated about $40,000 for that buyout if necessary. So worst case scenario, if on April 1st when Cottage Town is kind of reduced and the moves start to happen, if these members do not want to move as well, then you may have to dip into the endowment fund, or you may have to take some of the profit from the sale of the location just to help mitigate that. But it will help clear up the books and maintain better revenue stream in the future. So, in conclusion, bringing it all together, what we have for you is an overhaul of Cabbage Town, the sale of Cabbage Town, or part of Cabbage Town, and really ensuring that that location becomes efficient and profitable on its own. Right now it's a huge drain of resources, and even though it's not the most ideal situation to sell some of your assets that are really, really valuable, it's become necessary. You're really in the red lot, you're not having as much donations, so it's important. Then with the increase to start getting some revenue on the books right away, the next couple of weeks. And then the donation campaign with the money that's been freed up from the sale of your assets will all come together to really keep your doors open and ensure that you can run as an organization and continue to provide those vital services to the Toronto people. And with that, I'd like to thank you very much and open the floor to any questions.
Okay, so you've got a positive revenue flow for this year, right? With the sale of 2 floors of Cabbage Town at 1.8. So that's great for this year if all of the things fall into place. Everyone can sell it. What happens next year? You're not selling another property.
Right. And so basically that means that if you don't count the sale of Cabbage Town, you've got approximately $1.2 million in the red. And so if you look at the past 3 or 4 years, that would be the best number in the red that you've had in the last 4 years. In 2008, it was still, correct me if I'm wrong, around $2 million. So that's about on par with your donations per year. So long as you continue to invest a little bit in your donation campaigns, if that is costing you $200,000 a year, but is bringing you $2 million in revenue, it's worth it, and then you can continue to remain solvent.
So why the decision to sell a part of the space instead of leasing it, which would be sort of more long-term sustainable revenue, not even getting quick influx of cash, but just sort of have something, over the next 5 to 10 years.
We did look at that option, and we debated actually quite a bit on whether or not to lease or to sell. But we see that there was a lot of red on the books, and this year alone could have bankrupted possibly the organization if it kept going down. The endowment fund wasn't even big enough to cover some of your deficit that we're going to be seeing. So we thought the immediate sale was somewhat necessary. If there is another way to facilitate the campaign and get enough donations where it won't become insolvent, then looking at a long-term lease would be a good idea. But at this point in time, it's kind of we see necessary to sell those assets to remain solvent.
I'm curious as to how you're going to handle the concern of the unionized workers here, essentially closing down or scaling back substantially the operation that has the highest part of unionization. How much you deal with the press and community and the pushback?
What we mentioned in our presentation is that we would like to see those workers not necessarily let go from the organization completely, but just transfer to a different location. And we took this into consideration. We didn't want to transfer them to a location with non-unionized workers, because that could create problems. We wanted to put them in places where workers were already unionized or where there was no program that existed yet. And so, talking to the employees of the organization, we really saw that their main purpose, their main goal of being with the project was the children that they worked with and the people in the communities that they worked with. And we really believe that even moving them just the 5 kilometers or 8 kilometers away would ensure that it wasn't a major move for them, but they could still provide the services to the community and they would still be employed by their organization.
You consider the drop in the demand when you raise the fee, or was that calculation based on the actual plans that we have right now?
Yeah, I took the 2010 numbers for the production hours per facility. I then applied the growth factors for the facilities that were expected to grow and the reduction for Cabbagetown, and then applied the new fee increases to those numbers. So they're definitely adjusted for growth and for
Do you see any impact in the team morale in that productivity? We were still impacted really and
There definitely is probably going to be some pains involved, but like we said from the very beginning, as long as you keep your staff informed, keep them in the loop, and so they know what's going on, we feel that a lot of them will understand that there's necessary shifts to keep the organization afloat. So as long as you treat them well and make sure that their voices are heard, then bringing them into the decisions that need to be made is really an effective way to help mitigate some of the pain that might be felt and some of the bad feelings with closing out the facility.
Did you give any thought to letting people go straight up?
We definitely did. I mean, it's an option. You'd also mentioned that, since the other facilities are still a little bit underutilized, they might not need an influx of staff right away. But again, that was an option we wanted to leave open. We thought it would leave a much more sour taste in the mouths of all of the employees throughout the organization if we said, oh, well, the company is doing poorly, we're going to have to let a bunch of you go. So we'd like to give them the option, first of all, to help the company through different facilities if they choose to go, or if at a further point it's still infeasible for the organization, which we don't see happening, that would be like a looking at that.
That's all for questions.